Hi everyone, it's Mark. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about buying or renting a house. I'm going to talk about the pluses and minuses of buying versus renting so that hopefully you can make a decision on your own as to what makes the most sense for you. Also, I'm going to talk about what has changed in terms of the market and making this decision since I made the decision myself many years ago. Finally, I'll give you my opinion as to what the normal answer is in terms of buy versus rent now and if that's changed or not. I'm really pumped to share this with you, but before we get started, if you could do me a favor and help me out with that YouTube algorithm and smash that like button. For me, the main benefit of renting is flexibility. You're only locked into a particular property for 6 or 12 months, depending on what type of lease you sign. And when the lease is over, you can give 30 days notice and move to a different property, a different city, a different state, even a different country. This can be a great benefit if you need the flexibility because you're changing jobs, or your job might transfer you to a different city, or if you're new to a city and so you don't know what properties or areas of the city you like, or even if you like the city at all. Even if you do break the lease, you're typically only responsible for the remaining part of the lease, which might be 2 months, 6 months, whatever. And in most states, you're probably going to be responsible even for less than that, because the landlord is usually required to what's called mitigate the damages. That means try to get the property rented again. He can't just let it sit vacant and charge you because it's vacant. So for example, let's say if you broke the lease with 6 months left and he got it rented after 2 months, he couldn't let it sit for the last 4 months. You'd only be responsible for the 2 months when it sat vacant. In terms of monthly cost, the rent is probably going to be cheaper than what you would pay for exactly the same property. So for people who need cash up front rather than worrying about long-term wealth, renting can be a good solution. Also, remember that you're not going to be responsible for any repairs or maintenance, whereas if you own the house, you would be responsible for those. So if the hot water heater goes out and you're renting, then the landlord has to fix it, whereas if you're owning, that's your responsibility. That can add up to quite a few dollars over the length of a lease. In a lot of ways, buying is the opposite of renting. Your payment will probably be a little bit more. However, part of that goes to increase your net worth, in that part of it is principal, which reduces the amount of the loan, the amount that you owe the bank. So that's a growing asset for you. Additionally, you have tax benefits in that the part of your payment, the property taxes and the interest, are tax deductible. Additionally, most times a property will go up in value over time, and that's your asset, you own it, so that increase in value accrues to you, whereas if you're renting, you don't own anything, that increase in value goes to your landlord. So that increase in value, it can be cashed out, you can get a new loan, you can sell the property and recoup it, or you can give it to your heirs. When you leave a rental property, you just leave everything behind because you had no ownership in it at all. Let's talk briefly about entry costs. It's probably cheaper to get into a rental property. Often you'll need first month's rent and then a security deposit, which might be the same as the rent. So let's just say you need 2 months worth of rent to get into the property. For buying, I know a lot of people focus on the down payment and they say 20% down, which can be many tens of thousands of dollars depending on the purchase price. And that's true for a conventional loan. 20% down is what the banks are looking for. But there are a lot of cheaper options. For example, if you're a veteran, you can get a VA loan with zero down. And even if you're not a veteran, most people in the United States can qualify for an FHA loan, which is insured by the federal government. That down payment can be as low as 3%. And if you combine it with state programs, especially first-time home buyer programs, then you can push that down even farther, potentially to zero down. So I've talked a bit about the benefits of renting. What are the benefits of owning? I've already talked about them a little bit, that you own the property, so its increase in value goes to you. Part of your payment goes to reduce the loan, so that's also increasing your net worth. These are all long-term benefits that you're going to get down the road. Additionally, part of your payment is tax deductible, your property taxes and your interest. If you happen to itemize your taxes, then you can take those off. But for me, the biggest benefit is security. And I mean security in the physical sense and in the financial sense. In the physical sense, I mean that I determine when and how I leave the property. If I don't want to leave it, I don't have to leave. There's no landlord who's going to tell me in 30 days you got to be out, your lease is over, I'm not going to renew it because I'm selling the property or I'm moving back into the property. That can never happen. As long as I make my payments, I can stay here forever. And once the loan is paid off, then I only need to pay property taxes and I can stay forever. That's the physical security part, that I know where I'm going to be living a year from now, 5 years from now, and no one can change that. The financial security is that I know how much my payment was going to be. I have a fixed rate loan, so for the next 15 years or 30 years, depending on the term, my payment's not going to go up. It may go up a little bit because of insurance and property taxes, but those are going to be small compared to the principal and interest portion. If you're in a rental, when the lease ends, unless you're under rent control, you're at the mercy of your landlord. He can raise your rent as much as the market will bear, as much as he wants, and your only choice is to pay it or to move out. I had a friend who moved down closer to me, and he was looking to move into an apartment, which he eventually did. It was a nice apartment. It was overlooking some canyons. It had a nice view. It's set up on a hill. It was a luxury apartment. It had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It had pools and jacuzzis and covered parking in terms of a carport. And his rent was $1,200, which was a pretty good rent at the time. The problem was that with each annual lease that expired, the rent went up by $100, $200. By the time he moved out, his rent had increased to $2,400, which was exactly the same price that he would pay after he bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath detached house and put 20% down. So he did have the down payment, but his payment was the same. And his payment would never change over the 30 years that he had the loan. I promise you that the next year, if he had stayed, his payment would have gone up from $2,400 to $2,500 or $2,600 and just kept going up from there. When I look back on the buy or rent decision that I made, it was very easy because buy had all the benefits that I've talked about here, but it had one more big one, and that big one was the big tax benefits. That's one of the 2 main reasons, along with not having to have a landlord, that I wanted to get into my own place. I wanted to save on taxes. I didn't want to keep using the standard deduction. I wanted to start itemizing my taxes. And to do that, I needed to be paying property taxes and be paying mortgage interest. And I was able to do that. And for a long time, I was able to increase my take-home pay because of those tax deductions. That benefit is no longer really the case, and it's for 2 reasons. The first is a change in the tax policy. Your state and local taxes are only deductible to the amount of $10,000. That probably seems like a lot, but in high tax states like California, New Jersey, it's not as much as you would think. But the bigger issue is that the standard deduction has been doubled. When you combine that with the fact that interest rates are so low, it doesn't make sense for me, for example, to itemize. I've been taking the standard deduction because it's doubled and because I'm paying so much less in interest. I don't itemize. The standard deduction is more than what I would get when I itemized. With all the refinances I've done, each one I've lowered the interest rate on my house more and more. With all those refinances plus the increase in the standard deduction, it no longer makes sense for me to itemize deductions. I don't actually deduct the mortgage interest or the property taxes on my personal residence on my taxes anymore. I just take the standard deduction now. So, given all these pluses and minuses, what do I think about the buy or rent decision at this point? As I said, it's not quite as clear-cut as when I first made it years ago. And I'm obviously biased in favor of real estate since I've been doing it for so many years and it's been so good to me. But I still think if you're settled in your career, you know where you want to live, what city, what area, especially if you have two incomes and you either have a family or you're going to start a family, I think it makes a lot of sense because you're still going to have home ownership, you're still going to have that security of where you live and how much you're going to pay. Additionally, there's another side to the coin about the lower interest that I talked about. Yes, I no longer deduct it, but part of the reason I no longer deduct it is because I pay so little of it. The interest rate is so low that I just don't pay that much interest, so it doesn't make sense to deduct it. Additionally, when interest is this low, your payment is lower. That means either you get the same house for a lower price in terms of your monthly payment, or if you want to pay the same amount, you can get a bigger house. Your dollar goes farther because when you're borrowing at these low rates. So that's what I think about buying versus renting. If you've made it this far in the video, I would love it if you would engage with me. If you've got a question or a comment, leave them below. I do read all of the comments, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.